Dark Bleatings, everybody. Quick little sort of disclaimer before I get into the topic of the video. If suddenly this happens, it's not because I'm trying to look like an asshole wearing my sunglasses inside my house. I've been fighting off a migraine for what feels like forever, and I'm trying to just get on with my day because they can be quite debilitating, but my eyes are very light sensitive, and I don't know if having the big light on is helpful, or if putting the glasses on is actually making it worse. I don't know, so I've just got them here just in case. So anyway, I'm starting an author of the month video, which I'm going to do towards the end of every month. It's not necessarily going to be an author whose books I've read and reviewed that month, but I just thought it might be an extra nice little way to sort of shine a spotlight on the indie authors that I really love, that I think, you know, more people should know about. And I'm really hoping to give you guys some new writers to check out, and hopefully you'll love them as much as me. This author, I haven't actually read anything by this month. I've read everything that they've released so far, and there might be something in the works for later on, but nothing new at the moment. The reason that I've entitled this video "The Best Horror Writer You've Never Heard Of" is not because no one has heard of this writer. They're quite well known and liked in the British indie horror circuit, but just sort of like in the wider scope of horror publishing, this person's name is not banded around enough. I wish I saw this author's name in, you know, the Books of Horror group on Facebook more often, and, you know, just various other places around the web. I wish I was seeing people, you know, talk about their books, because they really do deserve the attention and the recognition for all of the great, scary, horrible stuff they've written. So the author of the month for March 2024, and you know, some of you might have guessed this, but it's Kit Power. I know that Kit Power is very uncomfortable with promoting his own work, and it's very uncomfortable for, I'd say, at least half the indie authors I know, including myself. I can talk all day about other people's books, and I really enjoy doing that, but when I talk about my own, I feel like I'm spamming people. It's a unfortunate reality of being in indie publishing, is you do have to spend a lot of time trying to put the word out about your book without looking arrogant, without forcing it down people's throats. That's how it feels anyway when you post. So yeah, I know that Kit's very uncomfortable, but I'm not uncomfortable talking about Kit's books, so here's an entire video dedicated to his work and why he's so awesome and why you should be reading him. So let me just run you through his published works so far. So he is a writer of both fiction and non-fiction, and I would say he's equally skilled and talented at both. So first up, we have the only book I haven't read so far, which is Tommy. He advised me to watch the film before I read this book, and I haven't had time to watch it yet. I don't really have a lot of free time, and I usually spend it reading rather than watching films and things. So I'm gonna watch this soon anyway, so just so I can read this. And then the next, I'm so happy that he put these into collections. So we've got My Life in Horror Volume 1 and 2 here. So these are, oh, it's a lovely picture on Volume 2 on the back, by the way, in case you wanted to, you know, what Kit looks like. So he wrote this great article series on Ginger Nuts of Horror called My Life in Horror, where he'd pick a topic like a film or a piece of music or something from his childhood and then his formative teen years, and he would talk about the impact on him, and he'd sort of reflect on how that formed his personality, particularly like the horror loving part of his personality. And it was just such a great series. And then unfortunately Ginger Nuts of Horror had to relaunch last year, and they lost pretty much everything that had been published on the previous site before. But luckily for us, Kit put his article series in these 2 volumes. It's now been handed over to George Daniel Lee, by the way, if you wanted to check it out, who's doing an excellent job with My Life in Horror. But I really loved this article series. It was my favourite article series just in general to read, and that's actually how I met Kit. I say met via the internet, because we both used to be contributors on Ginger Nuts of Horror, so I kind of knew him from our little Facebook group. So yeah, the interesting thing about these articles, firstly, the way that Kit writes is just so compelling. He's got a lovely writing style, very very personable, very easy to relate to. A lot of the things he picks, you'd think, oh, of course that would inform your horror taste, like things like Gremlins he talks about, things like that. Robocop, of course. If you know Kit, then you'll know about his obsession with Robocop. But then there are other things in here, pieces of music and just things that sometimes real life experiences, things that are more personal and things that you wouldn't necessarily immediately associate with being a horror fan. So yeah, they're really sort of like empathic, self-reflective pieces of writing. Yeah, really, really worth a read. Next up, let's do his longer works. So we've got Godbomb, which was his debut. This is about a guy who walks into a church during a service and demands to speak to God himself, otherwise everyone in this church is doomed. Really, really great tense concept. We're in a few different viewpoints, we jump around a little bit. Yeah, just extremely tense, really great character work. I actually sort of like beta, how do you say that? Beta read this for Kit. Yeah, back in the Ginger Nuts days. So this was his debut. He was looking for people to give it a read before he did his final edit, and I was so impressed with it. I'd been reviewing indie works, and I'd only really just been introduced to the indie horror scene, but I'd been sent a lot of books for review for Ginger Nuts, and the quality of the writing was sort of like up and down on those, or like whether or not I enjoyed the stories and things like that. I was just, you know, dipping my toe in the water, and then this really impressed me. I couldn't believe the quality of his actual writing and his skill and his writing style, and how like firmly established his writing voice already was for a debut. And then besides that, the characters were really compelling and the story was, you know, really had me hooked. The concept was really fun, and yeah, I was just really impressed with it. So then when he asked me for my critical feedback, I was absolutely useless because I had nothing, which I know how annoying that is now as someone who sends out stories asking for critical feedback, but I sincerely just didn't have anything but praise when I read it. So yeah, I snapped that up when it came out. Then we had The Finite. Oh, this was published by Sinister Horror Company, which unfortunately had to close its doors in January this year, but I'm hoping that another publisher will be smart enough to re-release this, or maybe Kit's already working on re-releasing it. I don't know, but I just feel like it'll come back into print. You could probably still find copies of it though. And then The Finite is by Black Shuck Books. This is an apocalyptic father-daughter story of survival. There are some creepy themes in here. Someone on Facebook recently described this as a jollier version of The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Like, if you're looking for something that's not as upbeat as The Road, try The Finite, which I thought was really funny. Yeah, it's a bit of a tearjerker. Once again, unbelievable character work, great plot. I'm a real sucker for apocalyptic fiction anyway. That's one of my favorite subgenres of horror, so I really, really rate that one. That one made me cry, and I think about it often. And then the next one, A Song for the End, which was released by Horrific Tales. Yeah, Horrific Tales Publishing. This is really, really fun concept. This is apocalyptic as well. It's about a guy in a band. They release a song. Unfortunately, for some reason, everyone that hears the song when it's released. What did I just say? Yeet. Everyone yeet. Everyone that hears the song when it's released is doomed. And I'll say no more about that. But yeah, I really like the cover art for this one. Once again, just a really, really fun time. It's not my favourite of Kit's works, but that's not to sort of down talk this one at all, because everything Kit puts out is basically my favourite for a spell of time. Like, the general quality of his work is very consistently high. And then we have his short story collections, which I think maybe the collections are my favourite, but it's really hard. I kind of yo-yo between which is my favourite book by him. So this one, I think that this is the Black Shuck Books release. This had 2 releases. I'm pretty sure this is Black Shuck Books. In any case, this is called A Warning About Your Future Enslavement That You Will Dismiss as a Collection of Short Fiction and Essays by Kit Power. by Kit Power. So the concept of this one is very bizarre and really interesting, and I was quite impressed that he pulled it off, because I recently wrote a themed micro collection and I connected each of the stories. To me, each of my short stories was just part of the same big story, but only one reviewer so far has picked up on that, so I don't know if I was too subtle with it or if I didn't put the message across properly, but I found it hard to do that. How Kit did this, I don't know. It's still full of notes from when I reviewed it. So it's a collection of Kit's short stories and essays, but there's a central thread, like a sort of like a central narrator almost, talking to us in between the stories and essays, so everything is kind of connected. It's kind of an overall story with questions about human history and things like that. It's very hard to explain. It's one of those ones you kind of just have to read to see what I mean, but the conceptual idea for this is really, really fun, and it comes together really well. And I feel like I wouldn't have wanted to have been in Kit's head while he was putting this together, because I would have gone mad trying to figure out how to piece this appropriately so it makes sense. The way I'm describing it is probably confusing. I know what I mean, and hopefully you'll just pick the book up and see what I mean anyway. Think of it like, the closest thing I can think of to compare this to in concept and construction is House of Leaves, but it's very different. That's the closest thing. Let's move on to the next one. So anyway, then we have Breaking Point, which is 4 stories about people hitting their breaking point, and they're all written in the first person, and I think this might be my actual favourite book of Kit's. Once again, very hard to tell, I yo-yo. And then we have the Shadows book that he released with Black Shuck Books. So they have a collection called the Shadows Collection. They're all little micro collections by individual authors. The books in the series aren't connected at all, but the kind of theme of the Shadows Collection is that each of the collections is themed by the author. So yeah, this one is called Voices, and the theme is voices, maybe inner voices, or maybe people are talking to you from the outside or whatever. And a couple of these are first person, but we've got all kinds of stories in this one, and I really enjoyed it. I flew through this. I read this in one sitting. So you've got, a particular horrific type of baptism story to open the thing. My favourite story in this one is called All Loving, All Knowing. Or is it All Knowing, All Loving? No, All Loving, All Knowing. That one, I really appealed to my dark side. I really, really enjoyed it. There's threads of other subgenres woven through. You've got a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of spiritual, kind of religious horror, bit of comedy even, dark comedy, but it's in there. So yeah, that's a really great one. It's my favourite of the Shadows books. What a shock, because it's Kit Power's one, and I really hope that he does another one. So yo-yoing back to Breaking Point. So the first thing I would like to tell you about Kit Power's writing and why I rate him so highly is because he is hands down, out of all authors I've ever read across whatever size press they're with, if they're in major publishing or indie or self-published, whatever, Kit's first person stories are the best for me. I've never read another writer that writes in the first person as well as Kit Power does, and if ever I've opened one of these stories to see first person, I've been so excited. It's really like one of his greatest strengths, and I do think he's just strong across the board as a storyteller and someone who develops characters. But yeah, his first person writing is just exceptional to me. The thing about my reading tastes, so I'm very character orientated. I do care about plot and story. I care about things making sense, and you know, the world of the story being well constructed and all of that stuff. But I really care a lot more about characters. So if a plot is a bit thin to me, or it doesn't make sense to me initially, if the characters are great, I'll still enjoy the book and I'll still see it through to the end. Kit's also really good at concepts, plots and storytelling, so it's not an either or scenario for his works, but his characters are always really, really strong. I think of him the same way, you know, I like him for the same reasons that I like Stephen King. Stephen King is very character-centric, gives us a lot. And the thing about Kit's writing is, because a lot of these stories are short stories, or his longer works are still, they're not 500-page novels, he doesn't have a lot of time to give us these characters, but he always really cements them very early on. So even if you don't like them, you relate to them, or if you don't relate to them, there's something really compelling about them. You have to keep reading. They're always really interesting. His first person work, though, shines so much, because especially in a book where all of the stories are first person, like Breaking Point, so it would be very easy and understandable if the storytelling was a bit samey, considering that we're in first person and this is Kit writing all these stories. But he's so good at putting himself in the head of his character that they all read like they were written by somebody else. All of these first person characters have got such strong personalities, their own turn of phrase, their own way of talking to you, that it just doesn't feel like a book of stories all written from the same mind. I find that just really impressive. That I think that might be harder to do in first person than in any other tense, when the person's just talking directly to you. So I really love that about his writing. It makes me jealous as a writer that I'm not as good at character, considering I work really hard on character. But yeah, the other thing in his short stories with his characters is you got such a tiny window to get people to care about them, and his characters are always so strong and clear, even in that limited amount of pages. So I don't know, I read a lot of short story collections, especially review requests that come in for Happy Goat, and an issue that I have with a lot of them is that the characters feel a little bit shallow to me, like they don't feel like fully formed people. And I know that that's because with a short story you normally have your concept for your short story and then you work from that. I think maybe novel writing's a little bit different, like maybe a lot of people start with character and they build a story around them, but for short stories what seems to be the process is you start with the story and then you build on that. And for that reason, sometimes the story is really intriguing, but the characters are just kind of like the vessel that you tell it through. It's just never the case with Kit's work, though. His characters always feel very flesh and blood and real to me, and for that reason I am always hooked. His actual plots and concepts are always super different. So I read all of these as they were released, so it's been quite a while since I actually read a Kit Power book, but they all have really stuck with me. So some of these I've read once, and I read them years ago, and the fact that I still think about them and I can still remember them quite clearly is a testament to how great a storyteller he is. So the opening story, I haven't even opened this book for years, but I know that the opening story, a guy is riding his bike, comes off his bike, he wakes up somewhere he doesn't recognize, and that whole story was super tense. There's a story, so there's All Knowing, All Loving, All Loving, All Knowing. That one I really loved. There's also another short story that he wrote called Pulling Teeth, which has stayed with me, which very much felt like it belonged in the Stephen King universe of like Firestarter or something like that, or The Institute, something that involves the shop. In the Stephen King universe, I could see that fitting very nicely into. I don't know where this story is published or if it is published yet, because he read this aloud at a writing convention a couple of years ago. I think it was ChillerCon, so it was a couple of years ago. So he wrote a first person perspective, and the character that was talking to us was a house. And it was so good. And yeah, so like, once again, he's the only person I know that can write a perspective like that keeps you engaged from the start and you don't just dismiss it as just absolute madness. A Song for the End, A Song for the End has made me always wish that Kit would release the song, but of course we'd all be doomed if he actually released the song. The Fine Night still makes me sad to my core when I think about it, but I will definitely reread it. God Bomb, like I said, his first release, the concept has stayed with me, and even what I pictured as I was reading it, I still have those images in my head, so when I think back to reading this book, I can see the book as I was reading it, if that makes sense. And then yeah, I remember several of the topics that he covered in these essays, and these are just essays, they're articles. I mean, I don't mean to say like just non-fiction, but you know what I mean. Like usually I'll read an essay and I can only remember, you know, little bits of my overall take on it years later, but I can remember, I think you could probably quiz me on the topics he covered and I'll remember quite a lot of them. So I don't know, I don't understand why more people don't know about him, is what I'm saying. If you're somebody who enjoys the apocalypse, stories with a really dark edge, even if they seem to end well, you'll probably like him. I just recommend it all, really. If you want any more specifics about your tastes on any of these books that you might want to check out, ask away in the comments. I'd be happy to give you more information. I was trying to do the spoiler-free overview. And if I can just, you know, enter this last plea into this video, if you're someone who does read indie fiction, Kit Power or anyone else, if I can ask you real nicely to maybe just pop a review on Amazon or anywhere online to support their work. It's like I said at the beginning of the video, marketing your stuff as an indie writer is so incredibly hard, and trying to get reviews of your books is so unbelievably difficult. I made a video about this before where I said, you know, for every sort of 100 review requests I send out, I think I had about 5 to 10 reviews. It's really, really hard. So yeah, if you have read a book that you've loved recently, be sure to, you know, let people know about it, even if it's only 2 words, like it's good. That everything helps. I'm definitely going to be continuing on with the series, and I'm wondering who to spotlight next month. If you have any suggestions, let me know. Yep, getting that white spot thing in my left eye now, so soon I'll be at least half blind, and that'll be nice. I will be back on Sunday with a quarterly wrap-up for 2024 of everything I've read. Maybe I'll rate it or rank it. I haven't quite decided what I want to do with that yet, but we'll be talking about everything I've read and reviewed so far this year. If you're someone who also watches our gaming videos, we will be... Sorry if I was sick there for a second. If you're someone who watches our game videos, we are going to be returning with them in April. Had a few hiccups recently, but yes, we'll be recording soon, and we will be back with Parasite Eve 2 and hopefully finishing off Resident Evil 1 as well, which I realised the other day that we never finished that. So yeah, we'll see you with some more bookish and gaming content soon. As usual, I'd like to just give you the warmest bleed.